Well, there are 65,000 people in this country who rely on home care to enable them to live and stay in their own homes. 18 months ago, our reporter Adrian Lydon carried out an investigation into the home care sector, and what he discovered was deeply worrying. Following the investigation, the government promised that this wholly unregulated area would soon be regulated, and that the HSE also initiated a major review of the sector. So what is the situation now? Is it much improved? Adrian Lydon has revisited his story to find out.
A year and a half ago, Primetime Investigate showed what can go wrong in the home care sector if it's left unregulated. Undercover carers expose substandard care, with instances of force feeding, misuse of medication, theft and absence of training and Garda vetting. The government said regulation would be looked at as quickly as possible, yet in the meantime, and despite the election of a new government, very little has happened. Home helps provide a vital service. Tens of thousands of carers go into the homes of 65,000 older people every day to look after them. Many of these older people receive excellent care, but in the absence of statutory regulation and robust standards, there's concern about what is happening behind closed doors. After the Primetime programme, the HSE said it would review the care provided to older people in their homes. We've now gone and obtained copies of some of these internal investigations, and the findings yet again give cause for concern. One of the firms investigated was Clontarf Home Care. With 150 carers, it looks after 320 older people in their home. But in June last year, major breaches of its contract with the HSE were found. 48 staff had no Garda clearance, and of those, 24 had no references. Only 13 had any relevant qualifications. One carer without a reference or Garda clearance had received a verbal warning for gross misconduct.
If you take people off the street, you don't check their character, you don't check any reference. I mean, what job in this day and age would you take people in without even checking their reference? When they're dealing with vulnerable people, to Garda vet them, to make sure they haven't just walked out of a jail, and then to train them, to make sure that they're trained to do what they're doing. To do that and to put them into the homes of vulnerable people is just a recipe for disaster.
The report into Clontarf Home Care found the HSE was charged for work not undertaken. Some clients were deceased, some were in nursing homes, and others just didn't exist. The report highlighted 14 complaints, many concerned carers not turning up. In one, a client was left on 6 occasions to sleep in a chair all night because a carer didn't arrive.
It is disgraceful. It's completely unacceptable. And, you know, we just say to people, none of us would like to be left in that situation at a latter stage of our life. And it's happening because we have companies who have a very lax attitude, who don't have the structures put in place, who don't know when a carer hasn't turned up for work. And we also have people who are being cared for who are scared to report it, and that's not unusual.
I was struck by the lack of the quality of care. The whole issue of how people are employed to be providing care to vulnerable people in their home. As one of the complainants said, there was a casualness about employing people and the care plan that was provided.
Clontarf Home Care, a not-for-profit company, has been receiving €3.2 million per year to care for 320 older people. Since the HSE report, an acting manager was appointed last September.
I think, like any reasonable person, I would have been shocked at the poor standards of care demonstrated by such a large organisation. I don't think it was just Clontarf Home Care. I think there was the HSE failed to audit all the agencies that it had service level arrangements with. So I don't think there's any one organisation that was isolated in terms of that.
It's clear that historically there may have been other approaches we could have taken to the monitoring of these agencies, and indeed one of the measures we're taking to address that going forward is in relation to how we monitor the activity of home help agencies.
Home care is a booming business, worth in the region of €500 million each year. There are over 150 providers, which include the HSE, private companies and not-for-profit agencies. It emerged this week that Gardaí have launched an investigation into another not-for-profit company, Wicklow Community Family Services Limited, after financial irregularities were uncovered. In a statement, it said a comprehensive internal investigation has been sent to the HSE. And another company, Dublin North Inner City Home Help, has also come under the spotlight. Last year, under a contract with the HSE, it was given almost €1.8 million in taxpayers' money to provide 120,000 hours of home help to 335 older people. But an investigation last August found that it only delivered just over 43,000 hours, and over €1 million was left unspent.
There's older people across the country crying out for home help and they can't get it because the budget's been allocated, the budget's been spent. Now it turns out, when we look at the report closely, that many of the hours which were paid for were never delivered.
On staffing, it found Dublin North Inner City Home Help did not conduct interviews, no references were sought, and the 200 staff at the time had not been Garda vetted. Primetime has learned that once staff were vetted, 18 had previous convictions.
I thought that was pretty appalling, in terms that here are people that are not Garda vetted. Most of the there were no files for these employees for most of them. There were no available references. There didn't appear to be written contracts. You're sending these people into vulnerable people's homes.
It's a matter of concern. The fact that a staff member may have a conviction doesn't necessarily preclude them from working in this sector. However, you'd be expecting that a manager should know that there's a conviction, that they should risk assess it, that in fact the board of the company should be making a conscious decision as to whether they should either bar or allow somebody to continue or to start work.
The majority of clients at Dublin North Inner City Home Help said they were satisfied with the service, but the investigation stated that many found it difficult to make complaints, fearing the service would be withdrawn. On foot of the HSE report, an acting manager was appointed last December.
Although the findings are absolutely appalling in what was there, I don't believe that that's a continuous kind of cycle throughout the service. I think they happened, and to be honest, I probably, of my own personal belief, would be that they shouldn't have happened, and if there was some kind of regulation there, they wouldn't have.
Several reports dating as far back as 2004 have warned the government of the dangers of not having statutory regulation. Last January, the Law Reform Commission became the latest body to call for regulation and said it could be easily done by amending existing legislation.
The framework is already there in the Health Act of 2007 for nursing homes. HEQA is a body that has been set up in operation, has set the standards in terms of the regulations for nursing homes. It's a question of adding the home care providers to that framework.
So it could be easily done?
It could be easily done.
And what do you think is needed then?
Political will and a sense that it is really, really necessary.
But regulation is unlikely anytime soon. Last April, the Minister for Older People, Kathleen Lynch, told the Dáil that it could be 2016 before regulation would be in place.
I think it's extremely important that it's acknowledged as a service that should be inspected and regulated. However, I'm also clear that even if it is inspected and regulated, there's also a requirement for those who commission the service, for example, the health service, to make sure that what you're commissioning is actually being delivered. So I think there's a role for both elements of it. And at the moment, I think it is a difficulty, the fact that that regulation and inspection piece isn't in place.